"Can you spare some food?" she asked softly. The Hell's Angel saw something no one else did. The road stretched long and gray beneath a sky that couldn't make up its mind. Cold autumn wind bit at Cole Maddox's face as his motorcycle rumbled down the empty highway. The engine growled low and steady, a sound he knew better than his own heartbeat. He rode alone. He always did. The trees along the roadside had lost most of their leaves. The few that clung on were brown and curled, shaking in the breeze like they were holding on for dear life. Cole understood that feeling. He'd been holding on for a long time, too. His leather vest was worn soft from years of wear. Patches covered it, each one telling a story most folks would never bother to ask about. His arms were thick and covered in tattoos, faded blue ink that stretched from his wrists all the way up under his sleeves. Some were names, some were dates. Some he'd gotten so long ago he barely remembered why. His face was weathered like old leather itself. Deep lines carved around his eyes and mouth. A gray beard, once dark as coal, now streaked with silver. His hands, gripping the handlebars, were rough and scarred from decades of fixing engines and fighting battles nobody asked him to fight. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now, back to the story. He was 45 years old. He felt older than that most days. Cole slowed as the diner came into view up ahead. A small building beside the highway, its neon sign buzzing weakly against the morning light. The paint was peeling. The parking lot was near empty, but the windows glowed warm and yellow, and he could almost taste the coffee from here. He'd been riding since before dawn. His bones ached from the cold. A hot cup of something and a plate of eggs sounded like heaven. Cole pulled into the lot and cut the engine. For a moment he just sat there, listening to the tick of the cooling metal. The silence pressed in around him. It was a familiar kind of silence. The kind that came from being one man, alone, in a world that had learned to keep its distance. He knew what people saw when they looked at him. He'd seen it 1,000 times. The way mothers pulled their children a little closer. The way men squared their shoulders and looked away. The way waitresses forced a smile that didn't quite reach their eyes. They saw the leather. They saw the tattoos. They saw the scars and the beard and the size of him. And they decided, right then and there, exactly who he was. A long time ago, that used to bother him. Now he let them believe whatever they wanted. It was easier that way. Safer, even. If folks thought you were dangerous, they left you alone. And if they left you alone, they couldn't get close enough to hurt you. Cole had learned that lesson the hard way, more times than he cared to count. Somewhere along the road, he'd stopped trying to show people who he really was underneath. Because underneath, there wasn't much left that he trusted to share. He swung his leg over the bike and pulled off his helmet. His gray hair stuck up, and he ran a rough hand through it. The cold air stung his cheeks. He took a slow breath, letting it fill his chest, then let it out in a white cloud. Then he walked toward the diner door. A little bell jingled above him as he stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around him at once, along with the smell of bacon and fresh coffee. It should have felt welcoming. Instead, the room went quiet. A couple by the window stopped talking mid-sentence. An old man at the counter glanced up from his newspaper and quickly looked back down. A young waitress near the register froze, her coffee pot hovering in the air, her eyes going wide. Cole pretended not to notice. He always pretended not to notice. He moved toward an empty booth in the corner, boots heavy on the worn floor. That's when he heard it. A voice, small and soft, coming from just outside the door he'd walked through. "Can you spare some food?" Cole stopped. The voice was so tiny, so gentle, It barely rose above the hum of the diner. But something about it reached right through him. He turned toward the sound. Through the glass door, Cole saw her. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She stood near the entrance, half tucked against the brick wall, like she was trying not to take up too much space. Her jacket was much too big for her. It hung off her thin shoulders, the sleeves rolled up so many times they looked like fat rings around her wrists. Her shoes were worn near through, the toes scuffed pale. But it was her face that held him. Round cheeks, pink from the cold. Big brown eyes that were far too serious for someone so small. Her dark hair was pulled back into a messy braid, with strands slipping loose around her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't whining. She just stood there, waiting, polite as could be. A man in a business suit came walking toward the door. The girl stepped forward a little, her small hands clasped together in front of her. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. "Can you spare some food?" The man didn't even slow down. He looked straight ahead, pushed through the door, and let it swing shut behind him. He never once glanced her way. The girl didn't flinch. She just backed up against the wall again and waited. Cole felt something tighten in his chest. A woman came next, holding the hand of a young boy. The girl asked again, just as gentle, just as kind. The woman pulled her son closer and picked up her pace. "Come on, honey," she murmured, guiding the boy around the child like she was a puddle to be avoided. The little girl watched them go. Then she looked down at her worn shoes. Cole stood frozen just inside the doorway, one hand still on the cold metal handle. He'd seen a lot of hard things in his years. He'd seen fights and blood and men lying broken on the side of the road. But something about this small girl, asking so politely and being ignored so completely, cut deeper than all of it. The young waitress finally moved. She hurried over from the register, a paper bag in her hand. She cracked the door open and passed it out. "Here, sweetheart," she said. "Some toast and a couple sausages. Don't tell my boss, all right?" The girl's whole face lit up. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much." The waitress gave a tired smile and hurried back inside, brushing past Cole without meeting his eyes. Cole stepped away from the door and slid into the booth by the window, the one that looked out on the parking lot. From here, he could see the girl clear as day. He told himself he was just going to eat his breakfast, just going to get warm and move on. But he couldn't stop watching her. The girl sat down on the cold curb outside, the paper bag in her lap. She opened it slowly, careful, like it held something precious. Cole waited for her to dig in. Any hungry kid would. He'd been that hungry once himself, long ago, and he knew how it felt to want food so bad your hands shook. But she didn't dig in. She pulled out one piece of toast. She held it up and looked at it for a long moment. Then, careful as anything, she broke it clean in half. One half she set back inside the bag. The other half she began to eat, taking small bites, chewing slow. Cole frowned. She did the same with the sausages. Broke each one in two. One piece back in the bag. One piece for her. His coffee sat untouched in front of him, steam curling up and fading. He leaned closer to the window, his eyes narrowing. She wasn't just eating, she was counting. He could see her lips moving, soft little words as she looked at the pieces she'd saved. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a wrinkled napkin. Slow and gentle, she wrapped up every saved piece and tucked it away, close to her heart, like it mattered more than anything in the world. Cole set his cup down. She wasn't begging for herself. She was saving it for someone else. And when that little girl stood up, folded the empty bag, and started walking away down the road, Cole rose from his booth and followed. Cole gave her a good head start. He wasn't the kind of man who liked to sneak around, but something told him a little girl would spook easy if she saw a big biker trailing behind her. So he hung back, letting the gap grow between them. She walked with purpose. Small feet moving quick, arms wrapped tight around herself against the cold. Every so often her hand drifted to her jacket pocket, patting it, making sure the napkin full of food was still there, like it might vanish if she stopped checking. The main road fell behind them. The girl turned off onto an old service road, cracked and buckled, weeds pushing up through the broken pavement. No cars came this way, no people either. Just a long stretch of nothing, lined with skeleton trees that rattled in the wind. Cole slowed his steps. A child. Alone. Out here? His jaw tightened. She couldn't have been more than 6, and here she was, walking down a forgotten road that no one used, in the biting cold, with the sky turning gray overhead. No parent nearby, no one watching out for her. Except him. He kept his boots quiet on the pavement. He watched the way she moved, sure and steady, like she'd walked this path 100 times before. That was the part that gnawed at him worst of all. This wasn't new to her. This was her life. This lonely road was as familiar to her as a schoolyard should have been. A truck's horn blared somewhere far off on the highway. The girl didn't even flinch. She just kept walking, her messy braid swinging behind her, her too big jacket flapping around her thin legs. Cole thought about all the things that could happen to a child out here. A twisted ankle, a stranger with bad intentions, a car coming too fast around a blind curve. His hands curled into fists at his sides without him meaning them to. But she didn't seem afraid. That was the strangest thing. She hummed a little tune under her breath, soft and sweet, a song he didn't know. Every few steps she'd glance up at the trees like she was saying hello to old friends. The road bent to the left. The girl left the pavement entirely now, cutting across a patch of dead grass toward a thick cluster of trees. Cole stopped at the edge and watched her disappear into the brush. He waited a moment. Then he followed. The trees were overgrown, branches clawing at his leather vest as he pushed through. Twigs snapped under his heavy boots, and he winced at the sound, hoping she was too far ahead to hear. The ground sloped down, and there, tucked away where no one would ever think to look, sat an old storage shed. It was falling apart. The wood was gray and rotting. Part of the roof sagged low, and the single window was cracked and clouded with grime. Vines crept up one whole side, like the earth itself was trying to swallow it back down. The girl went right up to the door. She pushed it open with both hands and slipped inside. Cole crept closer. His heart was pounding now, though he couldn't rightly say why. He moved to the side of the shed and looked through a gap in the boards where the wood had split. What he saw stopped him cold. There was a man lying on the floor. He was stretched out on a bed made of old blankets and a flattened cardboard box. And even from here, Cole could tell something was wrong with him. His leg was wrapped in dirty rags, propped up on a folded coat. His face was pale and thin, beaded with sweat despite the cold. He looked like a man who hadn't stood up on his own in a long, long time. The girl knelt down beside him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the napkin, unfolding it, careful as anything. "I got some today, Daddy," she said, her voice bright with pride. "Toast and sausages. The nice waitress gave 'em to me." The man's eyes fluttered open. He looked at his daughter, and a weak smile crossed his cracked lips. "You found enough today?" he asked. She nodded hard. I saved it all for you. Cole stood frozen behind the split boards, his chest tight. The girl held out a piece of sausage. The man took it with shaking fingers and ate it slow, like it was the finest meal in the world. She watched him with such love in her eyes that Cole felt something crack open inside him. He couldn't stand there hiding anymore. He stepped around to the front of the shed. He pushed the door open gentle, his big hands careful on the rotting wood. The girl spun around. Her eyes went wide, and she scrambled to put herself between Cole and her father, arms spread out like a tiny shield. It's all right, Cole said, keeping his voice low and soft. He held up both hands. I ain't here to hurt anybody, I promise you that. The man on the floor tried to sit up. He winced, his face twisting with pain. Lily, get behind me, he rasped. But Lily didn't move. She looked up at Cole, studying his face the way she'd studied him outside the diner. Slow. Careful. Like she could see right through the leather and the tattoos to whatever was underneath. You're the man from the diner, she said. The one who noticed. Cole nodded. That's me. Lily, Daniel said again, sharper this time. It's okay, Daddy. She stepped aside. He's not scary. Not really. Cole crouched down slow, keeping his distance so he wouldn't crowd them. Up close, the man looked even worse. His skin had a gray tint to it, and the smell coming off that wrapped leg made Cole's stomach turn. He'd seen infected wounds before. On the road, in fights, in places he tried not to think about. This one was bad. Name's Cole, he said. Cole Maddox. The man swallowed. Daniel Carter. He nodded toward the girl. My daughter Lily. How'd you end up out here, Daniel? Daniel's jaw worked for a moment before he answered. Accident. At the shop where I worked. A lift gave out. Whole engine block came down on my leg. He let out a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. Crushed it good. Couldn't work after that. Couldn't pay rent. Couldn't pay for the doctor either. He looked away, ashamed. So here we are. Cole's eyes went to the leg. That needs a hospital. That's not something you sit on. I know what it needs, Daniel snapped. Then his voice softened, worn down to nothing. But there's no money. And if I walk into a hospital like this, they'll start asking questions. They'll see Lily's been out here alone with me, taking care of things a kid should never have to. His eyes shone wet. They'll take her from me. I can't let that happen. Cole understood then. The man was more afraid of losing his daughter than of losing his own life. He glanced at Lily. She'd gone back to her father's side, holding his hand in both of hers. How long's it been like this? Cole asked quiet. Few weeks, maybe a month. Daniel closed his eyes. It got worse fast. But I didn't want her to worry. Every time she asked, I told her I was getting better. Told her the medicine was working. He shook his head. There ain't no medicine, just her. Bringing me food she should be eating herself. Cole looked around the shed. Really looked. There was almost nothing. A few empty water bottles. A near-empty box of crackers. One thin blanket that wouldn't do a thing against the cold nights. No heat, no light, no supplies of any kind. A little girl had been carrying all of this, alone, on her small shoulders. Cole stood up slow. His knees cracked. He didn't say much. There wasn't much to say that would help right now. I'll be back, was all he managed. Daniel opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to refuse, but Cole was already turning for the door. He walked back through the trees, branches pulling at his vest, and he didn't feel them. He got on his motorcycle and pulled his helmet on. The engine roared to life beneath him. But as he rode away, back down that lonely service road, he couldn't stop seeing it. That little girl standing guard over her daddy. that leg wrapped in dirty rags, those empty bottles, and Lily's voice, bright and proud, saying she'd saved it all for him. Cole didn't sleep much that night. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark and quiet, the way he usually liked it. But tonight, the quiet felt wrong. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that shed, that leg, that little girl standing guard over her daddy like she was the only thing standing between him and the whole cruel world. He'd seen a lot of hard things in his life. Cole had learned long ago how to push them down deep and keep riding. But this one wouldn't stay down. By the time the sun came up, gray and cold through his window, he'd already made up his mind. He got dressed, pulled on his boots and his vest. Then he went to the store. The kid behind the counter at the pharmacy gave him a nervous look when he walked in. Big man, leather jacket, tattoos crawling up his neck. Cole was used to it. He didn't bother trying to seem friendly. He just started pulling things off the shelves. Bandages. The clean kind, sealed in packages. A big bottle of the strong antiseptic. Pain pills. Some of that cream that fought infection. He read the little boxes careful, squinting at the small print, and grabbed anything that looked like it might help a bad wound. Then he went next door to the grocery store. He filled a cart until the wheels squeaked. Bread and peanut butter, cans of soup. Fruit and crackers and juice boxes, the kind kids liked. Milk. Eggs. A whole roasted chicken from the warm case in the back. He grabbed a case of water, too, and hauled it up under one arm like it weighed nothing. At the last minute, he stopped by the shelf with the blankets. Thick ones. Wool. He grabbed two. Then he saw a small pink one, soft as anything, and he grabbed that too. For Lily. The woman at the checkout counted it all up with wide eyes. Cole paid in cash. He didn't say a word about who it was for. Loading it onto his motorcycle took some doing. He strapped the bags down with bungee cords, tucked the blankets in tight, balanced the water across the back. By the time he was done, the old bike looked more like a pack horse than anything else. He didn't care how it looked. He rode slow down that lonely service road, careful not to spill anything. Branches scraped at the bags as he pushed through the overgrown trees. Then the shed came into view, leaning and gray in the morning light. Cole cut the engine. The silence rushed back in. He started unstrapping the bags. His arms were full when the door creaked open. Daniel had dragged himself up to sit against the wall. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp now, and hard. He watched Cole set the bags down just inside the door. Lily peeked out from behind her father. When she saw the pink blanket sticking out of the top of one bag, her mouth fell open a little. "What's all this?" Daniel asked. His voice was rough. "Food," Cole said. "Medicine for that leg. Some blankets. Water." He set the last bag down and straightened up. "Enough to get you through a while." For a second, nobody said anything. Then Daniel's jaw tightened. "Take it back," he said. Cole blinked. "What?" "I said take it back." Daniel's hands curled into fists against the dirty floor. "I don't need it. We don't need it." He looked away, but his voice shook. "I don't take charity. Never have. Not gonna start now." Cole looked at him a long moment. He wasn't angry. He understood that kind of pride better than most. He'd worn it himself, like armor, for most of his life. He crouched down slow, so he was eye level with the man on the floor. "Good," Cole said quiet, "because this ain't charity." Daniel frowned. "Then what is it?" Cole let out a slow breath. He looked at the man's hands. Mechanic's hands. Scarred and strong even now, something tugged at the back of his mind, something old. "I'm returning a favor," Cole said, "though I don't think you remember me. But I think, mister, that you and me have met before. Daniel's frown deepened. Met before? I think I'd remember a man like you. Cole almost smiled at that. You'd think so. He shifted his weight, settling back on his heels. His eyes drifted to the wall, to a spot far away that only he could see. It was about 15 years back, maybe a little more. I was young, dumb, broke down to my last few dollars. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, the scratch of his beard loud in the quiet shed. I just lost somebody, Cole said. Somebody that mattered. I won't get into it. But I got on my bike and I rode. Didn't much care where. Just needed to keep moving, you know? Feels like if you keep moving, the hurt can't catch up. Lily had gone very still behind her father. She was listening the way children do, with her whole body. My bike gave out on me, Cole went on. Middle of nowhere. Some little town I'd never heard of. Engine just quit. I pushed it near 2 miles to the only shop I could find. He shook his head slow. I had maybe $11 to my name. Not enough for a burger, let alone an engine repair. I figured I was done. Figured I'd sleep on the ground next to that dead bike and wait to see what the morning wanted from me. Daniel had gone quiet now, too. The hard set of his jaw had loosened just a little. There was a mechanic there, Cole said. Younger fella. Kind eyes. I told him I couldn't pay. Told him the truth of it. Figured he'd send me packing. Cole's voice went soft. He didn't. He told me to sit down, gave me a soda out of his own cooler, and he worked on that bike half the night. Wouldn't take a dime. Not one. The silence stretched long between them. When I asked him why, Cole said, you know what he told me? Daniel's throat moved as he swallowed. When he spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. I told you, Daniel said, that you looked like a man who'd lost everything. He closed his eyes. And that somebody ought to remind you that you hadn't. Cole went very still. The two men looked at each other in the gray morning light. Something passed between them that neither one had words for. 15 years, 200 miles of road, a whole life lived since, and here they both were, in a leaning shed at the end of a forgotten road. It was you, Cole said. It wasn't a question. Daniel let out a shaky breath. His eyes had gone wet. Little green tank on that bike, he murmured. Cracked mirror on the left. I remember the mirror because I couldn't fix it and it bothered me for weeks after. A weak, watery laugh escaped him. You slept on my shop floor. I gave you my lunch the next morning. Cole felt something crack open inside his chest. Something he'd kept locked up for a long, long time. You did, he said. Egg sandwich, wrapped in wax paper? He shook his head, wonder in his voice. I never forgot it. Never forgot you. Told myself if I ever found the man who did that for me, I'd pay it back somehow. He looked down at Daniel then. At the broken leg. At the pale, tired face. At the man who'd once had kind eyes and steady hands, and nothing but generosity for a stranger with $11 and a broken heart. So this ain't charity, Cole said again, firmer now. You understand? You put something good into the world a long time ago, and it's coming back around. That's how it's supposed to work. Daniel's face crumpled. He turned it away, ashamed of the tears. But he didn't argue anymore. He couldn't. Cole reached out and put a heavy hand on the man's shoulder. Gentle. Careful. Then he looked at Lily, who was staring at him with those big, solemn eyes. I'm gonna come back, Cole told them both. Tomorrow, and the day after that, however long it takes. He held the little girl's gaze. You're not alone anymore, either of you. I promise you that. Cole kept his word. He came back the next morning with a saddlebag full of groceries. bread and canned soup, fresh apples, a jug of clean water. He came the morning after that with medicine and clean bandages and a wool blanket thick enough to keep the cold out. He didn't make a big show of it. He just set the things down and got to work, quiet and steady, the way he did everything. Daniel watched him at first the way a man watches a stranger. Careful, guarded. But Cole never asked for anything. He never made Daniel feel small. He'd change the bandage on that bad leg with hands surprisingly gentle for their size, and he'd talk about nothing much at all. The weather, his bike, a dog he'd once had named Biscuit. Slowly the guard came down. Lily was harder to win over. She kept her distance those first days, watching Cole from the corner with those big, solemn eyes. She'd take the food he brought, but only after he'd stepped back. She was a girl who'd learned to be careful. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Cole had brought a small box of colored pencils. He didn't say anything about it. He just left it on the edge of the crate that served as their table, then went to check the water jug like it was nothing. He heard the box open behind him, heard the soft rattle of pencils. When he turned, Lily was holding one up to the gray light, turning it slow, studying the color. A deep, warm red. "Thank you," she said. Quiet. Real. "You draw?" Cole asked. She nodded. Then, after a long moment, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a small notebook. The cover was worn soft at the edges, held together with a rubber band. She hesitated, holding it against her chest. Then she walked over and held it out to him. Cole took it careful, like it was made of glass. "You want to show me?" She climbed up onto the crate beside him and opened it herself, page after page, drawings done in pencil and crayon, careful and full of heart. A woman in an apron holding out an apple. Underneath, in shaky letters, "The store lady." She smiled at me. A man in a big coat. Gave us a blanket when it snowed. A woman with a stethoscope. The nurse who was nice to Daddy. "These are all people who were kind to us," Lily said. Her small voice was matter-of-fact. "I draw them so I won't forget. Everybody who's good deserves to be remembered." Cole had to look away for a second, had to swallow hard against the thing rising in his throat. "That's a real good thing to do," he managed. She turned the pages slow, showing him each one. Then she turned to a page near the back, and Cole went still. It was a drawing of a motorcycle, and a rider on it, wearing a leather vest, sitting tall and easy. The lines were rough, drawn by a child's hand, but there was no mistaking it. Underneath, in careful letters, "The good man Daddy told me about." Cole stared at it a long time. "When'd you draw this?" he asked. His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "Before," Lily said simply. "Before I met you." He looked at her. "Before?" She nodded. "Daddy used to tell me stories about a motorcycle man who helped people but never wanted anybody to know. He said sometimes the people who look the scariest have the biggest hearts." She looked up at him, and her eyes were clear and certain. "He said you should never be scared of somebody just because of how they look. You have to look closer." Cole felt his chest go tight. All these years, he'd let the world believe the worst of him, the leather, the tattoos, the scars. He'd worn it like armor, told himself it kept people away, kept him safe. And all that time, this little girl had been carrying a picture of him in her notebook. A good man, drawn before she'd ever laid eyes on his face. He'd spent so long hiding his kindness that he'd nearly forgotten he had any. "Your daddy," Cole said quietly, "is a smart man." Lily smiled. Small but real. That evening, as the light was fading and Cole was gathering up to leave, he heard tires crunch over the gravel outside. A truck door slammed. Then a voice, hard and flat, cut through the quiet. "Hey, who's out here? This is private property." Cole turned toward the shed door. A man stood there in the dying light. Middle-aged, arms crossed, keys jangling in one fist. His eyes moved over the shed, the makeshift bed, the injured man, the little girl. His face went hard. "You can't be here," the man said. "This is my land. I want you gone." The next morning came cold and gray. Cole rode out early, the frost still white on the roadside grass. He'd hardly slept. The man's words from the night before had followed him home and refused to let go. "I want you gone." He'd argued, kept his voice level, the way he'd learned to do when everything in him wanted to rise up hot. He'd told the man there was an injured father inside, a little girl. He'd asked for time. But the man, whose name he'd learned was Victor Hale, had only shaken his head. "Rules are rules," Victor had said. 2 days, then I call the county." Now Cole pulled his bike up the service road, past the overgrown trees, and killed the engine. The silence pressed in. And then he saw them through the open shed door. They were packing. Daniel sat on the edge of the makeshift bed, folding the wool blanket Cole had brought, his movements slow and clumsy from the bad leg. Beside him, a battered duffel bag sat half full. Lily was carefully placing her colored pencils back in their box, one at a time, like each one mattered. Cole stood in the doorway a long moment before either of them noticed him. Daniel looked up, and Cole saw it right away. The shame. It sat on the man's face like a weight, dragging down the corners of his mouth, hollowing out his eyes. "You don't have to say anything," Daniel said quietly. He went back to folding. "We'll be gone by tonight. Figure something out." "Figure what out?" Cole asked. He stepped inside, boots soft on the dirt floor. Daniel didn't answer at first, his hand stilled on the blanket. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough and low, like the words hurt coming out. "I don't know." He shook his head. "That's the truth of it. I don't know." He looked toward Lily, then quickly looked away, like he couldn't stand to. A man's supposed to give his kid a home, a roof, a safe place to sleep. His jaw worked. And here I am, getting run off private land like some stray dog, with her watching. "Daniel." She had to beg, Cole. Daniel's voice cracked on the word. His eyes were wet now, and he made no move to hide it. "My little girl, standing outside a diner asking strangers for food because her daddy couldn't get off the floor." He pressed the heel of his hand hard against his forehead. "What kind of father lets that happen?" The shed went quiet. Lily had stopped packing. She sat very still, watching her father, her small face solemn. Cole crossed the room slow. He crouched down in front of Daniel, bringing himself level, the way he might with a spooked animal or a frightened man, which sometimes came to the same thing. "Look at me," Cole said. Daniel didn't, so Cole waited, patient, steady, until finally the man raised his eyes. "You didn't fail her," Cole said. Each word came slow and certain. "You hear me? A man who fails his kid don't lie awake at night crying over her. A man who fails his kid stops caring. You never stopped. Not once." He held Daniel's gaze. "That little girl loves you so much she stood in the cold to keep you fed. You didn't raise a beggar. You raised a fighter. And she learned that from watching you." Daniel's face crumpled. He turned away, but not before a tear spilled down his cheek and dropped onto the folded blanket in his lap. Cole stood. He looked at the half-packed bag, the pencil box, the little girl with her big, careful eyes. "You're not doing this alone," he said. "Not another day." Daniel wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Cole, I can't ask you to—" "You didn't ask, I'm telling you." Cole pulled his phone from his vest pocket. I got a place, just for now. Warm, dry, roof that don't leak, and a door that locks. You and Lily are gonna sleep somewhere safe tonight, and we'll figure the rest out from there, one thing at a time. Daniel stared at him. Why? He whispered. Why would you do all this? Cole almost smiled. Because somebody once told me you gotta look closer. He glanced at Lily. And because I finally did. The clubhouse sat at the end of a gravel road, low and long, with a wide metal roof and a row of motorcycles lined up out front like horses at a hitching post. Cole eased his bike to a stop and cut the engine. Behind him, an old pickup rolled in slow. Daniel in the passenger seat, Lily buckled between him and one of the club brothers who'd driven out to help. The front door of the clubhouse swung open before they'd even gotten out. Big Ray stepped onto the porch first. He was built like a refrigerator, gray in his beard, a wrench tattooed on his forearm. Behind him came two more, then a third. Word had a way of moving fast through a place like this. They stared. Cole helped Daniel down from the truck, one arm under the man's shoulder, taking the weight off the bad leg. Then he reached up and lifted Lily out, setting her gentle on the gravel. She stood close to his leg, one small hand gripping the edge of his vest, her duffel bag clutched to her chest. The men didn't say a word. They just looked, at the injured man leaning on Cole, at the tiny girl in the oversized jacket, at Cole himself, who they'd known for 15 years as a man who kept the whole world at arm's length. Big Ray finally spoke. Cole, what's this now? Cole squared his shoulders. This is Daniel, and this is Lily. He said the names clear, like they mattered. They're staying here a while, till they get back on their feet. Nobody moved. They ain't charity, Cole went on, and there was steel under the words. You hear me? Don't nobody treat him like charity. This man fixed my bike once when I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. Wouldn't take a dime for it. So we're square in this house. They're guests, and they're under my protection. The word hung there. Protection. In this place, it meant something. Ray's eyes moved from Cole to Daniel, then down to Lily. Something in the big man's face shifted. He'd expected a lot of things from Cole over the years. A guest with a broken leg and a little girl wasn't one of them. Well, Ray said slowly, you heard him. He jerked his chin toward the door. Get the man a chair. Somebody clear the back room. It's got the good heater. The others moved, but their eyes kept sliding back to Lily. She was so small among them, so quiet. A couple of the men crouched or hung back, unsure, the way big rough hands get careful around something breakable. Inside, they got Daniel settled in a worn armchair near the wood stove. Lily perched on the arm beside him, her bag in her lap. The men gathered loose around the room, arms crossed, not quite sure what to do with themselves. It was Lily who broke it. She looked up at Big Ray, studying his face with those big, careful eyes. Then she opened her bag and drew out her notebook. She flipped through it slow, page after page, until she stopped. You look like the man who gave me a coat, she said softly. She turned the notebook toward Ray. On the page was a drawing. A wide man with a beard, a coat held out in 2 hands. Underneath, in crooked letters, a cold day, a warm heart. Ray leaned down. He was quiet a long moment. When he straightened, he cleared his throat rough, like something had caught in it. That so? He said. He didn't tell me his name, Lily said, so I couldn't write it. But I drew him anyway, so I'd remember. She looked around the room at all of them. I draw the good people, so they don't get forgotten. One by one, the men drifted closer. A skinny one called Tuck crouched down. Can I see? he asked, gentle as anything. Lily nodded and turned the pages for him. Cole stood back by the door, watching. And a strange thing happened in his chest. He watched Tuck's hard face go soft over a child's crayon drawing. He watched Ray blink fast and look away. He watched these men the whole world crossed the street to avoid, lean in careful around one small girl like she was something worth protecting. And Cole understood, all at once, that the kindness he'd hidden his whole life had never been his alone. His brothers carried it too. They'd just learned to hide it, same as him. The days that followed had a rhythm to them, like the steady thump of a good engine. Cole was up before the sun most mornings. He'd start the coffee, then check on Daniel in the back room. The man's leg was healing slow, but it was healing. Cole changed the bandage careful, the way the doctor had shown him, cleaning the wound with a gentle hand that seemed too big for such small work. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said one morning, wincing as Cole wrapped fresh gauze around the leg. "I know I don't." Cole tucked the end of the bandage neat. "That's why I'm doing it." Daniel didn't argue after that. The clubhouse changed around them, little by little. Tuck dragged in an old mattress from somewhere and set it up in the back room so Daniel wouldn't have to sleep in the chair. Big Ray fixed the busted window so the draft stopped whistling through at night. Two of the younger brothers spent a whole afternoon scrubbing down a corner of the main room, hauling out old parts and grease rags, sweeping until the concrete floor shone. They were making a space for Lily. Cole built the desk himself. He found scrap wood out back, good pine, and he sanded it smooth over 2 evenings. He built it low, just her size, with a little shelf underneath for her notebook and her crayons. When he set it in the cleared corner near the warm stove, Lily stood in front of it a long while, not saying anything. "Is it okay?" Cole asked. He wasn't sure why his heart was beating so hard over a little desk. Lily reached out and touched the smooth top. "It's mine?" "It's yours." She turned and wrapped her arms around his leg, quick and fierce. Then she let go, embarrassed, and climbed up into the chair like she'd been sitting there her whole life. Cole had to turn away for a second. He rubbed the back of his neck and pretended to be busy with something. The men noticed. They always noticed. But none of them said a word about the shine in his eyes. Something in Cole was opening up. Slow, like a door that had been shut so long the hinges had rusted. He found himself watching Lily during the day, making sure she ate, making sure she was warm, making sure the men didn't play their music too loud when she was drawing. He found himself talking more. Laughing, even, low and rusty. One afternoon, Tuck reached to ruffle Lily's hair as he passed, and Cole's head came up sharp, quick as a guard dog. Tuck froze. "Easy," Tuck said, hands up, grinning. "Just saying hi to the boss." Cole let his shoulders drop. "Yeah," he muttered. "All right." But he understood then how deep it had gone. This need to keep her safe. It had grown up in him without asking permission, and now it was just part of him, like his own 2 hands. In the evenings, when the work was done, Lily would sit at her new desk and draw. The men would drift by to see, and she'd show them, patient and proud. Her notebook was filling up fast now. One night, when the stove had burned down to embers and Daniel had drifted off in the back room, Lily tugged Cole's sleeve. "I made new ones," she whispered. "You want to see?" Cole sat down heavy on the floor beside her chair, so his head was level with hers. She flipped the notebook open and turned the pages slow. There he was. Page after page. Cole bent over Daniel's leg, wrapping the bandage. "The man who fixes what's broken." Cole building the desk, sawdust in the air around him. He made me a place. Cole standing in the doorway, arms crossed, looking out at the road. Underneath, in her careful, crooked letters, he watches so nothing bad comes. And the last one, Cole with the little bit of a smile she must have caught somewhere. The man everyone thinks is scary, but he's not. He's just good. Cole stared at that page a long, long time. His whole life, the world had looked at him and seen something to fear, something to avoid. He'd let them, because it was easier, safer. But this little girl had looked closer. She'd seen the truth of him, and she'd written it down in crayon, so it would never be forgotten. The next morning, Cole took Lily back to the diner. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he just wanted her to have a good breakfast, something hot off Mary's griddle. Maybe he wanted the world to see her different this time, walking in beside him instead of standing out in the cold with her hand out. The bell over the door jingled when they stepped inside. The warm smell of bacon and coffee wrapped around them. A few heads turned, the way heads always turned when Cole came anywhere. But something was different. Lily didn't hang back by the door this time. She walked right up to the counter, and Mary Sullivan came out from behind it, wiping her hands on her apron, her face breaking open like the sun. "Well, look who it is," Mary said. She crouched down, slow, her knees not what they used to be. "You had breakfast yet, sweetheart?" Lily shook her head. "Then you sit right up here. Best seat in the house." Mary patted a stool at the counter. She looked up at Cole. "You too? Coffee's fresh?" Cole slid onto the stool beside Lily. He felt the eyes on him. He always did. But Mary talked while she cooked, easy and warm, and slow the story came out. How Lily had been coming here for weeks, how she'd stood out front asking for food, how Mary had watched her wrap it careful and carry it off, and never once eat a bite herself. "I should have asked her sooner," Mary said, low, sliding a plate of eggs in front of Lily. "Where she was taking it. I told myself it wasn't my business." She shook her head. "That's the lie we all tell." Word moved through the diner the way word moves through small places. Quiet at first, then not so quiet. A trucker in the corner booth, a big man with a gray beard, set down his fork. "That the little one been out front?" Mary nodded. "Feeding her daddy," the trucker said, slow like he was working it out. "Hurt, you said?" "Hurt bad," Cole said. It was the first thing he'd said since he walked in. The whole diner went still. "Legs tore up. Can't work. Can't hardly move." Nobody spoke for a moment. Then the trucker reached into his coat and pulled out his wallet. He walked over and set 2 20s on the counter next to Lily's plate. "For your daddy," he said gruff. "You tell him a fella named Earl says get well." Lily looked up at him with her big eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she pulled out her notebook and her crayon, and she started to draw him, right there. Earl watched her do it, and something moved in his weathered face. He cleared his throat hard and went back to his booth. It spread from there. A woman with 2 kids brought over a bag of clothes from her car, said her boy had outgrown them, but they'd fit a small man just fine. A young couple left money folded under the sugar jar. An old farmer promised a load of firewood come the weekend. Mary stood in the middle of it, her eyes wet, hands pressed to her chest. "Would you look at that?" she murmured. "Would you just look?" By the time they left, Lily had 3 new drawings and a bag of donations too heavy for her to carry. Cole slung it over his shoulder. He held the door, and the whole diner called out goodbye, warm as family. Out in the parking lot, the cold air hit clean. Cole loaded the bag into the saddlebag while Lily hummed to herself, happy. He should have felt good. And part of him did. But part of him stood there in the gray morning light and did the hard math. Firewood didn't pay a doctor. Folded 20s didn't fix a leg torn to the bone. Kindness was pouring in like rain now, and it was a beautiful thing, a thing he'd never believed he'd see. But Daniel needed real medicine, real care. The wound needed watching by someone who knew more than Cole did. There were bills already, and more coming, stacking up somewhere in the dark like a storm building over the hills. Cole looked back at the diner window, all those good faces glowing inside. Kindness was a start, just might not be enough. The shed had grown warmer since Cole started coming around. He'd brought a small heater, patched the worst of the drafts, laid down clean blankets. Tonight, the two men sat on the floor with a wooden crate between them, sorting through a box of old tools Daniel had asked to have brought over from a storage locker across town. The tools were worn, but cared for. Cole could tell a lot about a man by his tools. These were kept oiled, the handles smooth from years of use, each one wiped clean before it was put away. "You did good work with these," Cole said. He turned a wrench over in his hand. The metal was solid, honest. Daniel leaned back against the wall, his hurt legs stretched out careful in front of him. 30 years I've been fixing things, he said. Started when I was younger than most. Cars, trucks, tractors, didn't matter. If it had an engine, I could talk to it. Cole set the wrench down in its slot. Ran your own shop? For a while. Daniel's face went soft, remembering. Small place off Route 9, wasn't fancy, but folks knew they could bring their trouble to me. Cole reached into the box and pulled out a thick notebook, the pages curled and grease-stained. He opened it. Rows and rows of names, dates, jobs. But something was strange. Beside half of them, where the price should have been, there was nothing. Just a small mark, a little check over and over. What's this? Cole asked. These jobs, no charge? Daniel was quiet a moment. Then he shrugged, like it was nothing. Some folks couldn't pay, he said simply. Single mama with 3 kids and a car that wouldn't start. Old man on a fixed check who needed his truck to get to the doctor. Young fella who lost his job and couldn't get to the next one without wheels. He shook his head. You can't take money from somebody who's already drowning. You just can't. Cole turned another page. More checks. Dozens of them. Whole seasons where he gave away more than he sold. How many? Cole asked. His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. Never counted, Daniel said. Wasn't the point. Cole stared at the numbers that weren't there. At the years of a man's sweat handed away in the dark, quiet, asking for nothing. And it hit him slow, the way cold water rises in a boot. This was the same. The same as his own bike, all those years back. A stranger fixing his ride overnight and refusing a dime. You never told anybody, Cole said. Wasn't anybody's business. Daniel picked at a loose thread on the blanket. A man does a good turn for the doing of it, not for folks to pat him on the back. He gave a tired smile. Anyway, word gets around you fix cars for free, pretty soon everybody's car is broke. Cole almost laughed. Almost. But something was pulling tight in his chest. He looked around the shed, the cracked walls, the hard floor, the little girl who'd stood out in the cold asking strangers for scraps of food. And here was her daddy, a man who'd spent 30 years lifting other people up out of the mud, lying here with a torn leg and no money and too much pride to let anybody lift him back. Daniel, Cole said. He set the notebook down careful, like it was something precious. You spent your whole life giving it away, every last bit of it, fixing folks up and sending them on and never letting them thank you proper. Daniel didn't answer. He looked down at his hands. And now you're the one hurting, Cole went on, quiet. And you're fighting me every step of the way. Won't take the groceries easy, won't take the help without a scrap. Like you don't deserve 1 ounce of what you handed out to everybody else. I don't want to be somebody's charity, Daniel said, low. It ain't charity. Cole leaned forward. It's your turn, that's all. You poured it out for 30 years. Now some of it's coming back. And you got to let it. His voice softened, cracked at the edges. You deserve the same kindness you gave away, Daniel. You hear me? Every bit of it. And I'm not going to stand by and watch you tell yourself you don't. The week that followed moved faster than Cole expected. He started with Mary. She was the kind of woman who knew everybody in 3 counties, and once you told her something worth caring about, it spread like warmth through cold hands. A teaching position, Mary repeated, wiping down the counter at the diner. She stopped and looked at Cole. You mean somebody to show the young ones how it's done? That's what I mean. Cole wrapped his big hands around a coffee mug. Man can't lift an engine block no more. Might never. But there's nothing wrong with his head or his heart or his hands when it comes to teaching. 30 years of knowing. That doesn't just go away because a leg does. Mary set down her rag. Her eyes went soft. Route 9 shop, that was Daniel Carter, wasn't it? Cole looked up. You knew him? Fixed my late husband's truck twice. She shook her head slow. Never charged us the second time. Frank tried to leave the money on the counter. Daniel chased him out to the parking lot and stuffed it back in his pocket. She laughed, but her eyes were wet. I always wondered what became of that man. He's been living in a shed a mile from here, Cole said, with his little girl. Mary went quiet. Then she squared her shoulders. Well, that won't do. Not one bit. By Wednesday, word had traveled. Cole rode from shop to shop along the highway, his boots heavy on the concrete floors, his voice steady. He talked to Ray at the truck stop garage. He talked to the 2 brothers who ran the transmission place off the interstate. He talked to a young mechanic named Petey, who'd only been in business a year and was scared of his own shadow. Every one of them listened. And a strange thing happened. The men who'd crossed the street from Cole his whole life leaned in close and listened to what he had to say. He taught half the mechanics in this town, Ray said, scratching his gray beard. Didn't know it till you said his name, but I learned to time an engine watching him work. I was maybe 17. He was quiet a long moment. You tell him he's got a bench here anytime he wants it. Long as I got a shop, he's got a place to teach. Petey said much the same. So did the brothers. By Friday, Cole had 4 shops willing to bring Daniel in, sit young mechanics down in front of him, and let the man do what he did best. Pass it on. Cole told Daniel on a gray Saturday morning, sitting on the crate in the shed with rain tapping soft on the tin roof. Daniel didn't believe it at first. They said that? His voice was careful, like a man afraid to hope. Ray? Ray Dawson said that? Said you taught him to time an engine when he was 17. Cole watched the man's face. Said you got a bench there long as he's alive. Daniel looked down at his hands. Those hands had given away 30 years. Now they trembled, just a little. I thought I was done, he said. The words came out broken. I thought a man who can't lift a wrench is a man who's got nothing left to give. You got everything left to give, Cole said. Just a different way now. Daniel pressed his palm flat against his hurt leg. He breathed slow, and when he looked up, there was something in his face Cole hadn't seen before. Not pride, not shame, something new, hope, plain and simple. A future, Daniel said quietly, like he was tasting the word. I got a future again. From the corner, where she'd been sitting quiet with her notebook, Lily lifted her head. She'd been listening the whole time. She always was. She flipped to a clean page. Her small hand moved fast, the crayon scratching soft against the paper. Her tongue poked out the corner of her mouth the way it did when she worked on something important. When she finished, she held it up. It was her daddy, sitting tall. And on his face, drawn careful in bright, waxy strokes, was the biggest smile she could make. "That's you," Lily said, "for when you feel sad, so you remember." Daniel took the picture in both hands, and he did not say a word, because he could not. The little house sat at the end of Mill Street, tucked behind a row of oak trees that had lost most of their leaves. It wasn't much. A single story with faded blue paint peeling at the corners. A porch that sagged a little on one side. But it had 4 walls, a roof, and a door that locked. To Daniel and Lily, it might as well have been a castle. Mary had found it. The house belonged to a cousin of hers who'd moved out west years ago and never got around to selling. She talked him into letting Daniel and Lily stay for cheap, and by cheap she meant almost nothing at all. "Just keep the lights on and the pipes from freezing," she'd told Daniel, patting his arm. "That's payment enough." Moving day came on a bright Tuesday, the kind of morning that felt washed clean. Cole showed up with 3 of his brothers on their bikes, the rumble of the engines shaking the quiet street. Neighbors peeked through curtains. A few children stopped their play to watch the leather-clad men climb off their motorcycles. But the men weren't there to frighten anyone. They were there to carry boxes. Big Tommy, a mountain of a man with a beard down to his chest, hauled the donated couch through the front door like it weighed nothing. Diesel, quiet and careful, set up the bed frame in Lily's room. Cole rolled Daniel's wheelchair up the ramp he'd built himself the day before, sturdy wood sanded smooth so it wouldn't catch. Inside, the house filled up piece by piece, a table from the diner, chairs from Ray's back room, dishes Mary had wrapped careful in newspaper, a lamp, a rug, a small bookshelf that Petey had painted white to hide the scratches. Lily walked through each room slow, touching everything like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "This is my room?" she asked, standing in the doorway of the small space with the bed and a little desk beneath the window. "That's your room," Cole said. She stepped inside. She set her notebook down on the desk, careful, like she was placing something holy. Then she looked out the window at the oak trees and the sky. "I can see the whole street," she whispered. Cole leaned against the doorframe and watched her. Something turned over in his chest. A warm, aching thing he didn't have a name for. Daniel wheeled up beside him. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. "I don't know how to thank you," Daniel said quiet. "Any of you." "Don't," Cole said. "That's not what this is for." They spent the rest of the day settling in. Mary brought a pot of stew that filled the whole house with the smell of home. Big Tommy fixed the sagging porch step. Diesel oiled the front door until it stopped squeaking. Lily drew a picture of the house and taped it to the refrigerator, and everyone agreed it was the finest artwork in 3 counties. For the first time in a long time, Daniel laughed easy. Lily fell asleep on the new couch before the sun even set, her notebook clutched to her chest. It felt to all of them like the hard part was over. Days passed. Good days. Daniel started at Ray's shop, sitting on a stool with young mechanics gathered close, teaching them the things his hands still remembered even when they couldn't do the work themselves. Lily started going to school again. She came home with more drawings, more names, more pages filled with kindness. The town began to breathe easier about the whole thing. People who once looked away now waved at Cole when he rode through. Then, one gray afternoon, Cole came by the house and felt it in the air before he saw it. The wind had changed. It came sharp and cold from the west, bending the oak branches, scattering the last of the leaves across the yard. He looked up. Far off past the trees, dark clouds were piling high and heavy on the horizon. The kind of clouds that meant business. Cole walked the perimeter of the little house slow. He pressed his hand to the porch post and felt it give. He looked up at the roof, where a few shingles curled loose at the edges. He noticed the window frames, old and cracked, letting in a thin whistle of wind. His jaw tightened. Lily came out onto the porch, hugging her arms against the cold. "Is a storm coming?" she asked. "Might be." Cole crouched down to her level. Daniel wheeled to the doorway behind her, his eyes going to the darkening sky, too. Cole looked at them both. The little girl and her father. The family he'd never expected to have. "Listen," he said. "That old roof needs some work. Window frames, too. I'll get to it. Get some tools, patch it up right." He put a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "You two don't worry about a thing, you hear me? Everything's gonna be okay." The storm came in the dead of night. It started slow, a low grumble far off, like something waking up angry. Then the wind picked up, howling through the oak trees, rattling the old window frames Cole had promised to fix. He'd meant to get to them. He'd meant to climb up on that roof with a ladder and a box of nails. But the days had slipped by, full of good things, and he'd told himself there was time. There wasn't. By midnight, the rain came sideways. It hammered the little house on Mill Street like fists. Thunder shook the walls. Lightning lit the sky white, again and again, casting jagged shadows across Lily's bedroom floor. The loose shingles peeled away one by one. Water found the cracks. It seeped in slow at first, then faster, running down the walls in dark streaks, pooling on the floors. The old porch post finally gave. It cracked clean, and half the porch roof sagged down, groaning under the weight of the wind. Inside, Daniel woke to the sound of dripping. He fumbled for the light. Nothing. The power was out. He rolled his chair through the dark, calling for Lily, and found her already awake, sitting up in her bed with her notebook hugged tight against her chest, her eyes wide. "It's okay, baby," he told her, though water was already creeping across her floor. "It's just a storm. Storms pass." They waited it out together in the front room, huddled beneath a blanket, listening to the house cry around them. Morning came gray and still. The storm had blown itself out some time before dawn, leaving the world dripping and quiet. Cole rode up Mill Street as soon as the sky lightened. He'd barely slept. He'd lain awake in his own bed, listening to the thunder, thinking about those loose shingles, thinking about the promise he'd made crouched down on that porch. Everything's gonna be okay. He came around the oak trees and stopped his bike hard. The porch had collapsed on one side. Shingles lay scattered across the yard like fallen leaves. And through the open front door, he could see the damage inside. Water everywhere. The rug soaked black. The little white bookshelf Petey had painted was warped and buckled. Cole was off the bike and up the ramp before he even knew he was moving. "Daniel," he called. "Lily. We're here." Daniel's voice came thin from the front room. "We're all right. We're okay." But nothing else was. Cole stepped inside, and his heart dropped through the floor. The stew pot Mary had brought lay knocked over. Lily's drawings, the ones taped to the fridge, hung limp and running, the colors bleeding into nothing. The donated couch was soaked through. And there, in the corner, sat Daniel's medical equipment. The machine that helped him with the exercises for his leg. The one the doctor had lent them. The one that was going to help him walk again someday. Water had gotten into it. The screen was dark and cracked. Wires lay exposed where the plastic casing had split. It was ruined. Dead. Gone. Daniel followed Cole's eyes. He saw what Cole saw, and something in him broke. "No," he whispered. He wheeled himself over to it, reached out with shaking hands, tried the switch again and again. Nothing. No, come on. "Daniel, that machine cost more than I'll make in a year." His voice cracked. He pressed the button one more time, then let his hand fall. His shoulders shook. "I can't replace it. I can't replace any of this. We'll figure it out." "How?" Daniel turned, and his face was wet, and it wasn't from the rain. "How, Cole? Look at this place. Look at all of it." He gestured at the ruined room, the running drawings, the soaked floor. "I brought her here. I told her we were safe. I told her the hard part was over. You didn't do this. The storm did. I'm her father." Daniel's voice dropped to almost nothing. "She had to beg strangers for food because of me. She had to grow up before she should have. And now this. I keep failing her, Cole. Every single time it matters, I fail her." Cole crossed the room. He knelt down beside the wheelchair and put a heavy hand on Daniel's shoulder, holding on firm, holding on the way you hold on to someone who's drowning. "You listen to me," he said low. "You have never once failed that little girl. You hear me? Not once." Daniel just shook his head and cried, and Cole held on. But privately, looking around at the wreckage, at the broken machine and the ruined home and the promise he'd made, Cole felt a cold doubt settle deep in his chest. He'd told them everything would be okay. He wasn't sure anymore that he could keep it. The house on Mill Street was empty and dark by the time Cole finally left. He'd stayed all day. He and two of the boys from the club had hauled out the soaked furniture, mopped what water they could, and nailed a blue tarp over the hole in the porch roof. Daniel and Lily were staying at Mary's tonight. She had a spare room over the diner, and she'd insisted, in that soft but stubborn way of hers, that there was no arguing about it. So Cole rode home alone. His own place sat quiet at the end of a gravel road. One room, mostly, a workbench, a wood stove, a bed he barely used. For years it had been enough. For years he'd told himself a man didn't need more than 4 walls and a roof that kept the rain out. Tonight it just felt empty. He shrugged off his wet jacket and hung it by the stove. His hands were raw from the day. His back ached. He sank down into the old chair by the window, and that was when he noticed it, sitting on the little table where he'd set it down. Lily's notebook. She'd left it in his saddlebag days ago, asking him to keep it safe from the rain. He'd forgotten. Now he picked it up, turned it over in his big, scarred hands. The cover was soft from handling. The corners were bent. He opened it slow, like it might break. The first page was the grocery store man. A stick figure in an apron, holding out something round and red. An apple. Underneath, in careful, crooked letters, the man who gave me an apple and said, "Keep it." He turned the page. A woman with a big smile and yellow hair. The nice nurse who wasn't scared of Daddy's leg. Another page. A neighbor holding a blanket. She said, "Stay warm, little one." Cole kept turning, page after page. A whole world of small kindnesses, remembered by a 6-year-old who had no reason to believe in kindness at all. Every person who'd ever paused. Every stranger who'd chosen to look instead of look away. She'd drawn them all. She'd kept them all. His throat went tight. Here was a mechanic who'd fixed a bicycle chain for free. Here was a bus driver who'd waited an extra minute. Here was Mary, unmistakable, drawn with a stew pot bigger than her whole body. The lady who cooks like she loves you. And then Cole appeared. He almost didn't recognize himself at first. The leather vest, the beard, the bike drawn with too many wheels because she was still learning. But it was him, no mistaking it now. And under it she'd written, "Cole fixed Daddy's wheelchair." Then a few pages later, "Cole made pancakes and burned them, but I ate them anyway." He laughed. It came out cracked and strange in the empty room. Another page. Cole teaching me about motors. Then, the day the scary man stopped being lonely. Cole stopped. He read it again. And again. His eyes stung and he blinked hard and stared out the dark window until he trusted himself to turn the page. He turned it. And there it was. The last page. Empty, but not blank. At the very top, in that careful crooked hand, she had written 5 words and left the rest of the page bare, waiting, patient as anything. The person who saved us. Cole stared at it a long time. She'd left it empty on purpose. He understood that now, understood it all the way down to his bones. She wasn't waiting for the drawing. She was waiting for him, waiting for the scary man to finally believe he belonged on a page in her book, belonged in their story, belonged somewhere at all. Everyone had walked away from that little girl outside the diner. Everyone had crossed the street their whole lives when they saw a man like him coming. But this child had drawn him laughing, had saved a whole page, had believed before he ever believed it himself that he was the kind of man worth remembering. Cole closed the notebook gentle and held it against his chest. He would not walk away. Not from them. Not now. Not ever. Morning came gray and cold, but Cole was up before the sun. He rode into town with the notebook tucked safe inside his jacket, close to his chest. The diner windows glowed warm against the early dark. Mary was already inside, moving between tables, and the smell of coffee and bacon drifted out to meet him before he even opened the door. Lily saw him first. She was sitting in a booth near the window, still in her pajamas, hair a mess from sleep. When she spotted him, her whole face lit up like somebody had switched on a light. "Cole!" She scrambled out of the booth and ran to him. He crouched down and caught her, and she wrapped her thin arms around his neck like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he was somebody worth running to. "Hey, kiddo," he said, and his voice came out rough. Daniel wheeled himself over slower. There were dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept much, that was plain. He forced a small smile that didn't quite reach. "You didn't have to come this early," Daniel said. "Wanted to." Cole stood up, keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder. "Mary, that coffee for anybody?" "Sit down before you fall down," Mary said warmly, already pouring him a cup. They settled into the booth. Lily climbed up beside Cole and leaned against his arm like it belonged to her. For a moment, nobody said anything. The rain from last night dripped off the eaves outside, slow now, the storm finally spent. Cole wrapped his hands around the warm mug. Then he looked at Daniel. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the house." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Cole, just hear me out. The house is done. You saw it. The roof's caved. The water's ruined everything." Daniel shook his head. "There's no fixing that. And even if there was, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm telling you." Cole set the mug down. "We're going to rebuild it, me and the boys. I already called 2 of them last night." Daniel went still. His hands gripped the arms of his wheelchair. "That's too much," he said quietly. "It's too much, Cole. You've already given us everything. The groceries, the medicine, the blankets. You brought me to the clubhouse like I was somebody. You fixed my chair." His voice cracked. "You've spent your own money, your own time. And now you want to build us a whole house? No, I won't let you sacrifice that much for us. I can't carry that." Lily looked up at Cole, then over at her father, her small face worried. Cole was quiet a long moment. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the wet road. "Let me tell you something," he said finally. "Something I never told anybody." Daniel looked up. "Years back, I was in a bad way. Worse than bad. I'd lost people. I'd lost pretty much everything that mattered, and I didn't much care if I lost the rest. I was riding through some town I don't even remember the name of, and my bike gave out. Just quit on me. And I had $11 in my pocket." Cole gave a short laugh. $11, that was it. That was all I had in the whole world. He turned the mug slowly in his hands. "I pushed that bike into a little shop. Told the mechanic I couldn't pay. Told him I'd come back when I could, knowing full well I never would. And that man just looked at me. Looked at me real close, the way most folks don't. Then he told me to leave the bike overnight." Cole's voice dropped low. "Next morning it was fixed, running better than it had in years, and when I tried to figure out how to pay, he wouldn't take a dime. He just said, 'You look like a man who's lost everything. Somebody ought to remind you that you haven't.'" The diner had gone silent. Mary stood by the counter, listening, her hand pressed to her chest. Daniel's eyes were wide now. His mouth opened, then closed. "That was you," Cole said softly. "You gave me hope when nobody else in this world would even look at me. You reminded me I was still worth something." He reached out and laid his scarred hand over Daniel's. "Now I want to give that back. Let me." For a long moment, Daniel didn't move. His chest rose and fell. Then, slow, like something inside him was finally giving way, he turned his hand over beneath Cole's and gripped it tight. "All right," he whispered. "All right." That was all Cole needed. By the time the sun climbed over the tree line, he was already on the phone. He stood out in the diner parking lot with his collar turned up against the cold, working through the numbers in his head. Lumber, nails, tools, hands. He called Big Mike first, then Ray, then Tank, and every one of them said the same thing before he even finished asking. Where and when? They rolled in one by one over the next hour. The rumble of their engines shook the windows of the diner, and folks inside looked up nervous the way folks always did. 6 of them, then 8, then a dozen. Leather vests and heavy boots, beards and tattoos and scarred knuckles. They parked their bikes in a long, shining row and climbed off and stood there in the gray morning, huge and quiet, waiting on Cole. Mary came out onto the diner steps, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at all those men. Then she looked at Cole. "Well," she said, "you'd best all come in and eat first. Nobody builds a thing on an empty stomach." She fed them. Everyone. Eggs and bacon and stacks of toast, coffee poured until the pot ran dry and she brewed another. She wouldn't take a cent, and while the men ate, she moved among them, patting shoulders, learning names, and by the time the plates were cleared, those big, rough men were smiling at her like she was their own grandmother. "I've got a nephew who lays roofing," Mary told Cole quietly. "I'll call him. And Sal down at the hardware store owes me a favor from back when his wife was sick. He'll cut us a deal on supplies." Cole looked at her. "You don't have to do all that." "Neither did you." She squeezed his arm. "That's rather the point, isn't it?" Word got around the way word does in a small town. By noon, folks were showing up at the ruined house who Cole had never met. 2 mechanics from the shop across the highway rolled in with a truck full of tools. A man named Peterson brought his flatbed loaded with lumber Sal had marked down to almost nothing. A woman Cole recognized from the diner, one who used to hurry her kids past him in the parking lot, came carrying a stack of clean folded blankets and a box of sandwiches. She stood there a second, looking at him. Then she said, "Quiet. I saw that little girl out here, more than once, and I never once stopped." Her eyes shone. "I'm sorry for that. Let me help now." Cole didn't know what to say. He just nodded and took the box, and something loosened in his chest. They worked all through the afternoon. The bikers hauled away the ruined timbers, their muscles straining, sweat cutting tracks through the dirt on their faces. Mary's nephew climbed onto what was left of the roof and started marking out the frame. The mechanics rigged a ramp so Daniel could wheel himself right up to the work, and Daniel, who couldn't stand, sorted screws and measured boards and called out directions in a voice that grew stronger as the day went on. Lily sat on a stump near the middle of it all, with her notebook open on her knees. She drew and drew, her tongue poking out in concentration, capturing every face she could. Cole stopped once to catch his breath and looked around at all of it. The men everybody feared, sawing and hammering and laughing. The townsfolk who used to look away, standing shoulder to shoulder beside them, passing nails and pouring water and lifting beams together. The woman who'd once crossed the street handing a sandwich to a man named Tank, and Tank thanking her soft as a prayer. Nobody was crossing the street now. Nobody was pulling their children close. They were all just people, side by side, building something that mattered. And standing there in the middle of them, Cole Maddox finally understood. Kindness wasn't something you gave once and lost. It spread. It grew. It changed everything it touched. The days that followed blurred together in the best kind of way. Morning after morning, the bikes rolled in with the sunrise. The house rose up beside them, board by board, nail by nail. Where there had once been a broken heap of rotted wood and storm damage, walls now stood straight and true. The frame went up on the second day. The roof went on by the fourth. Mary's nephew whistled while he worked, and the sound carried down over all of them like something hopeful. Cole worked harder than he had in years. His hands blistered, then calloused. His back ached at night in a way that felt good, honest. The ache of a man who had done something worth doing. He hammered until his arm was sore. He hauled lumber until his shoulders burned. And every so often he would look up and catch someone watching him. Not the way folks used to watch him. Not with fear. But with something like respect. Big Mike and one of the mechanics got to arguing over the right way to hang a door, and by the end of it they were laughing so hard they had to sit down. Tank taught the woman from the diner how to swing a hammer proper, and she got the hang of it fast, driving nails clean and straight, while Tank cheered her on like she'd won a prize. Ray brought his own kids by on the third day, 2 little ones, and before long they were running underfoot with Lily, chasing each other through the sawdust. That was the thing that got Cole the most. Those children, playing right there in the middle of all those big, rough men. Not one bit afraid. Lily never stopped drawing. She sat on her stump with her notebook, and her pencil moved and moved. She drew Mary's nephew up on the roof with the sun behind him. She drew the woman with the hammer. She drew Peterson unloading his flatbed, and Sal from the hardware store who came out on his lunch break just to see how it was coming. She drew her father in his wheelchair, pointing and directing, his face lit up in a way she hadn't seen in a long, long time. And she drew Cole. Over and over. Cole lifting a beam, Cole wiping his brow, Cole down on one knee, showing her how to tighten a bolt. "You're in here the most," she told him one afternoon, holding up the pages so he could see. Cole looked. His throat went tight. "That so?" "Mm-hmm." She flipped through them, proud. "You and Daddy. You're on almost every page now." He didn't know what to say to that. So he just reached out, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, gentle as he could with those big scarred hands, and went back to work. On the 6th day, it was done. The last nail went in a little after noon. Everyone stepped back all at once, like they'd rehearsed it. And there it stood. A real house. Small, plain, but solid. Fresh boards, and a good roof, and a ramp leading right up to the front door so Daniel could come and go as he pleased. Someone had even hung a curtain in the window, blue-checked and cheerful, though Cole never did find out who. A cheer went up. The bikers whooped and slapped each other's backs. Mary clapped her hands to her chest and just beamed. Lily ran up the ramp and back down again and again, laughing. Cole should have felt only joy in that moment, and he did feel it, warm and full. But standing there at the edge of the crowd, he found his eyes settling on Daniel. Daniel sat in his chair a little apart from the others, looking up at the house. He was smiling, but it was a careful smile, a quiet one. And Cole saw something behind it he recognized too well, because he'd carried it himself for years. A man could have a roof over his head and still not believe he deserved it. A man could be handed a whole new start and still feel like the same broken thing inside. Cole watched him. And he wondered if 4 walls and a good roof were going to be enough to bring the real Daniel back. The evening came on soft and golden. Someone had strung a few lights along the new porch railing, and they glowed warm against the falling dark. The bikes were parked in a long row, chrome catching the last of the sun. Somebody had a grill going, and the smell of it drifted over the whole yard, mixing with sawdust and cut grass and the good, clean smell of new wood. Folks sat around on overturned crates and folding chairs. Mary passed out slices of pie she'd carried over in a big tin, and the men ate them right out of their hands, licking their fingers and asking for more. Lily had fallen asleep against her father's side, her notebook still open on her lap, her pencil loose in her fingers. Cole sat on the porch steps with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. He wasn't much for crowds. Never had been. But this one felt different. This one felt like the sort of thing a man could sit in the middle of and just breathe. Daniel rolled up beside him, quiet. He'd gotten good at moving that chair over the rough ground. "You did all this," Daniel said. "Wasn't just me." "No." Daniel looked out over the yard at all those big, rough men laughing in the lamplight. "But it started with you." Cole didn't answer. He just took a sip of the cold coffee and set it down. Daniel was quiet a moment. Then he said, "I got something to show you. Been waiting for the right time." "Yeah?" "Come on. Round back of the shed. The new one. Tank helped me set it up." Cole rose and followed. The gravel crunched under his boots. Daniel led the way, wheeling steady, past the corner of the little house to a small workshed with its doors standing open. A single bulb hung inside, buzzing softly. Cole stopped in the doorway. There, in the middle of that little shed, stood a motorcycle. Old. He knew it the second his eyes landed on it. He'd know that bike anywhere. He'd ridden it 1,000 miles, slept beside it in the rain, cursed it and loved it, and finally let it go years back when the engine seized and he couldn't afford to fix it. But it wasn't seized now. The chrome shone like new. The leather seat was oiled and dark. The tank had been sanded and painted, the old black bright and deep again. Every bolt, every line, every part sat clean and true, like it had rolled off the line yesterday. "Daniel," Cole breathed. "How did you—" "Found it in a scrap lot 2 counties over. Been tracking it for months, since before the accident." Daniel wheeled up beside it and laid one hand on the seat, gentle. "Recognize the frame numbers. Same bike I patched up all those years ago. I couldn't work much, being like this, but I could do a little every day. Lily helped me, handed me the tools. We did it slow, Cole stepped closer. His hand shook as he reached out and touched the tank. Cold metal, smooth under his rough palm. His throat had gone tight and hot, and he couldn't seem to swallow past it. "You fixed my bike," he said, and his voice came out cracked. "Same as before, all those years ago." "You saved my daughter," Daniel said simply. "Figured I owed you a ride." Cole shook his head. He couldn't speak for a moment. He stood there in that little shed with the bulb buzzing over him, running his hand along the machine this broken, prideful, kind man had rebuilt with a child's help and a body that barely worked, and something in his chest cracked wide open. For years he'd believed he was only good for one thing: being feared, being alone. He'd let the whole world think the worst of him because it hurt less than hoping for better. But this man had seen him. This man had spent his last strength giving him back a piece of who he used to be. And more than that, so much more. Cole turned. Daniel was watching him, that same careful smile on his face. "No," Cole said, and the tears came now, hot and silent, running down into his beard. "No, you didn't just give me my ride back." He looked toward the house, toward the lights, the laughter, the little girl asleep with her notebook full of good people. "You gave me a family. You gave me somewhere I belong." The weeks that followed passed like a slow, warm river. Daniel found his place again. Not the way he'd had it before, standing over an engine with grease to his elbows, but a new way. A better way, some might say. The mechanic shop in town, the one that had promised him a teaching spot, made good on their word. Every morning, Cole would load the wheelchair into the truck bed, and the two of them would rumble down the highway together, the sun coming up gold over the fields. Daniel taught from that chair. He'd roll along the row of work bays, pointing, explaining, showing the young ones how to listen to an engine the way you'd listen to a friend. "It's telling you something," he'd say. "You just gotta be quiet enough to hear it." The boys who came to learn were rough around the edges. Some had dropped out of school. Some had trouble at home. But Daniel never once looked at them like they were less. He looked at them like they were worth something, because he knew what it felt like to be counted out. "Everybody's got a story," he told them one afternoon, wiping his hands on a rag. "Half the time nobody bothers to read it." And on Saturdays, Daniel did something else. Something that spread through town, quiet as morning fog. He fixed cars for free. A single mother whose brakes had gone bad. An old man whose truck wouldn't start. A young couple with a baby and a busted radiator and not a dime to spare. Daniel took them all. He'd roll up his sleeves, guide the young mechanics through the work, and hand back the keys with a nod and nothing more. "Just pass it on," he'd say. "That's all I ask." Lily went back to school. The first day, she stood at the classroom door in a clean dress, her hair brushed and her shoes new, clutching her notebook against her chest like it was made of gold. Cole had driven her himself, the big motorcycle purring low, Lily wrapped tight behind him in a little helmet they'd found just her size. The other children stared. So did the teacher. But Lily wasn't scared anymore. When the teacher asked if anyone wanted to share something special, Lily's hand shot up. She walked to the front of the room. She opened her notebook. "This is my kindness book," she said, her small voice steady. "Every time somebody's nice to me, I draw them, so they get remembered." She turned the pages one by one. The grocery worker with the apple, the nurse who smiled, the neighbor with the blanket, Mary from the diner, and then the pages full of big rough men on motorcycles, laughing, building, fixing. "This one," she said, holding up a drawing of Cole, "is the man everybody was scared of. But he wasn't scary at all. He was just lonely, and nobody had looked at him close enough to see." The room went quiet. A little girl in the front row raised her hand and asked if she could make a kindness book too. By the end of the week, half the class had one. Word travels in a small town. It moves from porch to porch, from the diner counter to the church steps, from one kitchen table to the next. And Lily's message traveled fastest of all. Mothers started telling their children about the little girl who saved her food for her daddy. Teachers read from a story they'd heard secondhand. The diner customers who'd once looked away from a hungry child now talked about her like she'd taught them something they'd forgotten. Because she had. People began to look twice. At the man on the corner. At the woman counting coins. At the stranger with the tired eyes. They began to wonder what stories were hiding behind those faces. What pain, what hope, what quiet courage. Mary put a copy of one of Lily's drawings in the front window of the diner. Underneath it, in her own careful hand, she'd written the words that had started to mean something to the whole town. Every person has a story worth seeing. The evening had settled soft and golden over the little house. Cole had spent the afternoon in the yard, tightening bolts on Lily's bicycle, the same bike she now rode alongside his motorcycle down the quiet back roads. His hands were still dusted with grease when Lily came out onto the porch, holding something against her chest. "Cole," she said, "can you come sit with me?" He wiped his hands on the rag hanging from his belt and followed her inside. She led him to the little wooden desk he'd built her all those months ago. It sat by the window now, catching the last of the day's light. On it rested the notebook, her kindness book, but it looked different than he remembered. Thicker, worn soft at the edges from all the times she'd opened it. "It's full," she said, patting the seat beside her. "Every page. I finished it." Cole eased into the small chair, which groaned a little under him. He felt too big for it, the way he felt too big for most gentle things. But Lily didn't seem to mind. She never had. "Show me," he said. So she did. She opened to the first page, and there was the grocery store worker with the apple, drawn in careful crayon, a green apple bigger than his head. Then the nurse who'd smiled at her daddy, her mouth curved up in a wide arc. The neighbor with the blanket, Mary from the diner, her gray hair drawn in loops, a coffee pot in her hand. Lily turned each page slow, like she was walking Cole through a photo album of her whole heart. "This is Mr. Peterson," she said, pointing at a man beside a truck. "Daddy fixed his brakes for free. He cried a little. He thought nobody saw him anymore." Cole listened. He didn't say much. He just watched the pages turn, watched the story of kindness build up page by page, drawing by drawing. There were the men from the club, big and rough on paper, just like in life. But Lily had drawn smiles on all of them. She'd drawn Tank holding a hammer. She'd drawn Rooster laughing so hard his eyes were little X shapes. She'd drawn the whole crew standing in front of the rebuilt house, arms around each other. "They pretend to be scary," Lily said, grinning. "But they're not." "No," Cole said quietly. "They're not." She turned another page. There was her daddy in his wheelchair, but he wasn't sad in the picture. He was pointing at an engine, teaching, his mouth open like he was in the middle of one of his stories. Everybody's got a story. Half the time nobody bothers to read it. Cole felt something tighten in his chest. "Keep going," he said. Lily turned the pages faster now, through drawing after drawing. The doctor, the mechanics at the shop, the children from her class who'd started their own kindness books. A whole town, remembered on paper, held together by the steady hand of a little girl who'd decided that good people deserved to be seen. Then she reached the last page. She paused. Her small fingers rested on the edge of it. She looked up at Cole, and there was something soft and knowing in her eyes, something too old for 6 years. "This one's my favorite," she said. She turned it. Cole went still. It was him, but not the way strangers saw him, not the way people crossed the street from. There was no hard jaw, no cold stare, no shadow over the eyes. In the drawing, Cole was smiling. A real smile, wide and easy, the kind he almost never let anyone see. She'd drawn the leather vest and the tattoos, all the things that made people afraid. But she'd drawn his heart, too, somehow, right there on his face. Underneath, in her careful, wobbly letters, she'd written the words. The man everyone feared was the man everyone needed. Cole stared at it for a long time. He didn't trust his voice. His throat had gone thick and tight, and his eyes burned in a way they hadn't in more years than he could count. Lily leaned her head against his arm. "See?" she whispered. "I told you somebody would look close enough." The seasons turned, the way they always do. Winter softened into spring, and spring warmed into summer, and the little town along the highway kept moving through its days. But something in it had changed. You could feel it if you paid attention. And these days, more people did. Cole still rode his motorcycle through town most mornings. The big black machine rumbled down Main Street, the same as it always had. The leather vest was the same. The tattoos were the same. The scars, too. Nothing about the outside of Cole Maddox had softened one bit, but the way people looked at him had. At the stoplight by the hardware store, old Mr. Peterson raised a hand and waved. "Morning, Cole," he called, his voice carrying across the street. Cole lifted 2 fingers off the handlebar in answer. A small thing, but it meant something now. The little kids didn't get pulled back by their mothers anymore. Instead, they pointed and grinned. "It's the motorcycle man!" one of them shouted, hopping up and down on the sidewalk. Their mothers just smiled and waved him along. At the diner, Mary had a fresh pot of coffee waiting before he even walked through the door. She'd hear the engine from 3 blocks away, she said, and she always knew it was him. "There he is," she called out, same as every morning. The little bell above the door jingled. "Sit yourself down. I saved you the good stool." Cole eased onto it. The counter felt like an old friend now. He'd sat there 100 times, maybe more, and every time he did, he thought about the first morning he'd pulled into that parking lot. How the whole place had gone quiet. How the parents had reached for their children. How he'd been so used to it that he barely noticed anymore. Now the noise didn't stop when he came in. It just kept right on going. The ordinary hum of a town that had made room for him. "How's Daniel getting on?" Mary asked, sliding a plate of eggs in front of him. "Teaching 3 days a week now," Cole said. "Got a whole crew of young ones following him around the shop like ducklings." Mary laughed, that warm sound that filled the whole room. "And Lily? Reading me a chapter book every night." Cole shook his head, something like wonder in his voice. "Faster than I can keep up." He ate his eggs slow. Outside the window, the town went about its business. A mechanic waved from across the road. A woman with a stroller nodded as she passed. 2 men loading lumber into a truck called out a greeting he couldn't quite hear over the traffic, but he raised his coffee cup to them anyway. It had all started so small. That was the thing Cole kept coming back to, in quiet moments like these. It had started with 4 words, spoken soft by a tiny girl in an oversized jacket, standing where nobody wanted to look. "Can you spare some food?" He thought about how many people had walked past her that first cold morning. How many had lowered their eyes, or crossed the street, or told her to move along. He'd been one of the few who'd stopped. and he'd only stopped because he knew what it felt like to be looked past. But Lily hadn't been begging for herself. She'd been carrying love, one saved bite at a time, for a father who couldn't carry it for himself. And when Cole had finally looked close enough to see that, something had cracked open in him, something he'd kept locked away for a very long time. Now the whole town looked closer. The grocery worker still slipped free apples to kids who came in hungry. The doctor still saw folks who couldn't quite pay. The mechanics gave away repaired cars to families who needed them. And kindness books were showing up in school bags all over town, filled with the faces of good people, remembered on paper. One small girl had done that. One small girl asking for food had taught an entire town to stop judging people by what they saw first, to look past the leather, past the fear, past the surface of a thing, and into the heart of it. Cole set his cup down and smiled. The years had a way of slipping by, quiet as water under a bridge. Cole was older now. His beard had gone mostly gray, and the lines around his eyes ran deeper than they used to. He rode a little slower these days, but he still rode. And on this bright morning with the sun climbing warm over the highway, he pulled his motorcycle into the parking lot of the roadside diner. The same lot, the same cracked pavement, the same little building with its faded sign. He sat for a moment before he cut the engine. Just looking. So much had changed. And somehow, so little. The bell above the door still jingled when he stepped inside. The smell of coffee and bacon still wrapped around him like a warm blanket. And though Mary had passed on a few years back, her spirit lingered in every corner of the place. Her granddaughter ran it now. She kept everything just the way Mary had, right down to the good stool at the counter. "Morning, Cole," she called, already reaching for the coffee pot. "Morning," he said, easing onto the stool. The diner hummed with life. Folks he'd known for years sat in the booths, laughing over breakfast. A couple of the old club members waved from a corner table. One of them, gray as coal now, lifted his mug in salute. Time had softened all of them in one way or another. The bell jingled again. Cole knew who it was before he turned around. Lily walked in, tall and grown, with the same gentle eyes she'd had when she was 6 years old. She was a young woman now, but she still carried herself soft and steady, still noticed everything, still looked at people like she was searching for the good in them. And tucked under her arm, worn at the edges and thick with pages, was the notebook. "You started without me," she said, sliding onto the stool beside him. "Never," Cole said. "Just keeping it warm." She smiled and set the notebook on the counter between them. It was fatter than it used to be, held together now with a rubber band. The cover was soft as cloth from all the years of being carried. "You still bring that thing everywhere," Cole said. "Course I do." She rested her hand on it. "It's the most important thing I own." They ate together, the way they had 1,000 times. She told him about her days at the school, teaching little ones to read, keeping notebooks of their own. He told her about Daniel, whose hands shook a bit now, but who still showed up at the shop, still passed his knowledge on to anyone willing to learn. Then Lily grew quiet. She pulled a pencil from her pocket and opened the notebook to the last empty page. Cole watched as she began to draw. The diner came first, its little window, its faded sign. Then the motorcycle out front, big and black, gleaming in the morning light. And around it, one by one, the faces. Mary, smiling the way she always had. Daniel, standing tall on his own 2 feet. The doctor, the grocery worker, the club members. Mr. Peterson with his waving hand. All the people who had, one ordinary day, chosen kindness over turning away. And in the center of it all, she drew Cole. Not the way the world had once seen him, not the scary man in the leather jacket, but the way she saw him. Smiling. Belonging. She wrote something beneath the drawing, then slid the notebook over so he could read it. For the man who taught a whole town to look closer. Cole stared at the page for a long time. His throat felt tight, and his eyes stung, and he didn't try to hide it. Not anymore. He'd spent so many years believing that being alone was safer, that the leather and the scars were all anyone would ever want from him, that his kindness was something to keep locked away. But sitting there, in the warm light of that little diner, surrounded by every face that had ever chosen to see him, he finally understood. He hadn't just found redemption on that cold morning years ago. He'd found a family. He'd found a place where he truly belonged. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.